Your son is dying in an alley on 5th Street. I don't know who you are, but this number says emergency, so I'm calling. 3 seconds of silence answered her. Not the silence of shock. The silence of a man who had heard terrible things before, and trained himself never to flinch. And then the voice that came back through that phone made every single hair on Emma Turner's body stand straight up. Do not call the police. Do not move him. And do not under any circumstances tell anyone you found him. She should have hung up. She didn't. If this is your first time here, welcome. Hit subscribe. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see exactly how far this story travels. Now let's go. Emma Turner had a rule about strangers in alleys. She did not stop for them, not because she was a cold person. She was the opposite of cold. She had spent the better part of her life being told she cared too much, gave too much extended grace to people who had long since stopped deserving it. But 12 years of closing shifts in a neighborhood like this one had taught her something you could not learn in a classroom. She had learned the difference between a situation she could help and a situation that would swallow her whole. She knew that difference the way she knew her own handwriting. And then she saw him. And she broke her rule. He was face down on the wet pavement, one arm stretched out like he had tried to catch himself falling and simply ran out of time. The suit was what stopped her. Dark, expensive, completely wrong for this alley, completely wrong for this zip code. She knew money when she saw it, even when it was crumpled on the ground in the rain. Hey! She stepped closer. Her shift had ended 11 minutes ago. She had $16 in tip money folded in her apron pocket. She had a container of leftover soup in her bag she had been planning to eat the moment she got home. None of that mattered anymore. Hey, can you hear me? Nothing. She crouched down and pressed 2 fingers to his neck the way her mother had taught her after her father's heart attack back when Emma was 12, and the world had shown her for the first time what real helplessness felt like. A pulse. Faint. Unsteady. But there. Okay, she breathed. Okay. You are still here. She rolled him carefully onto his side, and that was when she saw the blood. Dark. Spreading from somewhere under his jacket, soaking through the white shirt underneath. Her stomach dropped hard and fast. This was not a fall. This was not a drunk man sleeping it off. This man had been hurt deliberately. Someone had done this to him on purpose. I need to call, she said out loud to nobody. She pulled out her phone. She was halfway through dialing 911 when something made her stop. Not a thought, a feeling. The kind that lives below the brain in the part of you that is still animal, still wired for survival. She looked at the blood. She looked at his clothes. She looked at the empty alley around her, and she thought about the way it was empty. Not just empty, deliberately empty. Like something had cleared the space on purpose. She put 911 away. She reached into his jacket pocket instead, looking for ID, looking for a name, looking for something that would tell her who this person was so she could figure out what kind of help he actually needed. The wallet was thick. She flipped it open. The driver's license was right there. Ethan Sullivan, age 34. An address in the part of the city where the doormen wore suits nicer than anything Emma had ever owned. She turned it over. Nothing unusual. And then the business card slipped out from behind the license and landed on the wet pavement between her knees. No name, no logo, no company. Just a phone number printed in gold ink that caught the dim light of the alley and seemed to almost glow. And underneath the number in small clean letters, 4 words. For emergencies only. Call. Emma looked at the man bleeding at her feet. She picked up the card. She dialed. It rang twice. Just twice. Who is this? Not a question. A demand. Delivered in a voice so controlled it barely sounded like a voice at all. It sounded like a decision being made about her before she had even spoken. My name is Emma Turner, she said, and she was proud of how steady she kept it. I work at Murphy's Diner on 5th Street. I found a man unconscious in the alley behind the building. His name is Ethan Sullivan. It's on his license. I found this number in his wallet, and I didn't know who else to call. And he's bleeding pretty badly, and She stopped herself. I needed someone to know. A pause. Short. Surgical. How long ago did you find him? 3, maybe 4 minutes ago. How severe is the bleeding? She pressed her hand gently against his side and felt the warmth of it through the fabric and had to breathe through the wave of panic that tried to knock her sideways. It's significant. He needs a hospital. He will not be going to a hospital. The words landed flat and final, like a door closing. You will not call 911. You will not move him. You will stay exactly where you are. And you will not speak to anyone until my men arrive. Am I clear? Every rational part of Emma's brain was screaming at her. Strangers did not tell you not to call 911 unless calling 911 was specifically a danger to them. Strangers did not have cars full of men ready to deploy at 3 in the morning unless those men existed for a very particular reason. Every alarm she had was going off at once. She stayed on the line. Am I clear, Miss Turner? Yes, she said. You're clear. 4 minutes then, and this was the part that would stay with her long after that night had passed. He did not hang up. He left the line open. He left it open and said nothing. Just breathed. Just waited. Like he was standing guard over the phone connection itself. Like silence was a form of presence he had spent years perfecting. Emma knelt in the cold and listened to a stranger breathe through a phone and pressed her other hand gently against Ethan Sullivan's side and waited. At 1 minute and 40 seconds, Ethan Sullivan woke up. He came up fast. Not groggy, not disoriented, not the soft, confused way that normal people surfaced from unconsciousness. He came up like someone who had trained himself never to be caught vulnerable. His eyes opened and were scanning before the rest of him had even caught up. His gaze found Emma's face and locked onto it with an intensity she felt physically. Don't move, she said, quiet and firm. You're hurt. Help is coming. Who? His voice cracked. He cleared his throat, tried again. Who did you call? The number on your card. The change in him was instantaneous and complete. Every trace of disorientation disappeared from his face. And what replaced it was something Emma had no good word for. It was calculation and fear and resignation all fused together into one expression that made her feel for the first time genuinely and deeply afraid. His hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. His grip was iron. How long ago? He said. 2 minutes, maybe less. Did he answer himself, or did someone answer for him? He answered himself. Ethan closed his eyes. His jaw tightened. He was doing something she recognized. He was making peace with something. The way you make peace with a diagnosis you had been afraid of and now finally held in your hands. Okay, he said quietly. Okay, listen to me carefully. I'm listening. In about 2 minutes, cars are going to pull into this alley. You are going to see men you have never seen before doing things that are going to frighten you. His eyes opened and found hers. You cannot look frightened. Do you understand me? Who are these people? Can you do it, yes or no? Emma held his gaze. 12 years of managing drunks and entitled customers and landlords who showed up at the wrong hour had given her something. She didn't know what to call it exactly. Composure, maybe. The ability to feel the fear and keep her face above it. Yes, she said. He nodded. Then quiet and low. Something that was not quite an apology, but lived in the same neighborhood. I'm sorry you were the one who found me. She did not have time to answer, because the cars arrived. 3 black SUVs with no plates she could see moving into the alley, in a formation that was clearly practiced, clearly not the first time anyone in that convoy had done this. Men got out. Big men, silent men moving with the economical precision of people who did not waste a single motion. They went to Ethan without looking at Emma, assessing him with their eyes and their hands communicating in half-sentences and gestures she could not decode. One of them finally looked at her. His face said nothing at all. Step back, he said. She stepped back. And then the 4th vehicle arrived. It was longer than the others, and the man who emerged from it moved differently from the rest. Not faster, not slower, but with a quality of stillness that made everything around him seem like it was happening in his orbit. He was older, silver-haired, wearing a dark coat over what looked like clothes he had put on in a hurry. And his eyes went immediately to Ethan on the ground before they went anywhere else. In that half-second before the mask came back up, Emma saw it. A father's face, raw and stripped and terrified. Then it closed again. and Vincent Sullivan walked toward his son. "Ethan." He crouched down. He put one hand on the side of his son's face, a gesture so brief and so private that Emma looked away from it instinctively, the way you look away from something too human for a stranger's eyes. "I'm fine," Ethan said. "You are not fine." Vincent stood. He turned, and his eyes found Emma across the space between them, like they had been looking for her specifically, like he had already known exactly where she would be standing. He walked toward her. Emma had faced intimidating people before. She had faced them at the counter of Murphy's Diner at midnight when they were drunk and twice her size. She knew how to hold still. She held still. "You are the woman who called," he said. "Yes, Emma Turner." He already knew her name. Of course he did. He had known her name since the moment she had given it on the phone. "Yes, sir." Vincent Sullivan studied her the way she imagined a man studies a contract before he signs it, reading every clause, testing every word for weakness. She did not look away. She remembered what Ethan had said, and she held herself together with both hands and did not look away. "Tell me what he said when he woke up," Vincent said. There it was. The question she had known was coming since the moment Ethan had grabbed her wrist. She had approximately 2 seconds to decide what kind of person she was going to be in this moment. "He asked me if I was okay," she said. "I think he was confused about what had happened. He wasn't very coherent." Vincent held her gaze for 4 full seconds. She counted them. Each one felt like a stone being placed on her chest. "Is that all?" he said. "That's all." Another silence. And then something moved in his expression. Not warmth exactly. Not approval. Something more careful than either of those things. Recognition, maybe. The recognition of a man who had heard thousands of lies in his lifetime and had just heard something that was not one. Or thought he had. Emma was not sure which one was more dangerous. "My son is alive because you made the right call tonight," Vincent said, literally and figuratively. He paused. "That is not something I forget." "I didn't do it to be remembered," Emma said. She had not meant to say it. It came out before she could stop it. That automatic honesty that had always gotten her into trouble. The reflex of a woman who had spent her whole life refusing to pretend to be something she was not. Something shifted in Vincent Sullivan's face. A fraction. Almost nothing. "No," he said slowly. "I don't think you did." He turned away. He spoke to his men in low, quick sentences. They moved with fluid efficiency, getting Ethan onto a stretcher, loading him into the long car. The entire operation took less than 3 minutes from start to finish. Emma stood to the side and watched and kept her face exactly where it needed to be. Before he got into the car, Vincent looked back at her. "Go home, Miss Turner. Someone will be in touch." She walked. She did not run, even though every muscle in her body wanted her to run. She walked out of that alley and onto the street, and she walked the 6 blocks to her apartment building, and she climbed the stairs, and she unlocked her door, and she went inside, and she sat down on the couch without taking her coat off, and she stayed there. The clock on her microwave said 2:49 a.m. She felt like she had aged 10 years in 32 minutes. She was sitting there, not quite thinking, and not quite feeling existing somewhere in the suspended space between the two, when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Her heart hammered once hard. She answered. "Miss Turner." Vincent Sullivan's voice calling from a different line. "At 2:49 in the morning. I wanted to ensure you arrived home safely." The cold moved through her slowly, deliberately. "How did you know I was home?" The briefest pause. The timing suggested it. She looked at her window. She looked at the street below Amber, under the street lights empty and ordinary. She looked for a long moment. "I'm home," she said. "Good." A pause. "My son will want to thank you properly once he's recovered. I hope you'll allow that." Everything in her said no. No thank you. This was a one-time thing. "I found your son and I called, and now we go back to our separate lives and never think about each other again." "Of course," she heard herself say. "Good." Another pause. This one felt different. It waited like something was about to be placed inside it. Miss Turner. One more thing. Yes. What you told me tonight. About what Ethan said. He let that sit for just a moment. I believed you. I want you to know that I believed you because I chose to. Do you understand the difference? Emma sat very still in her cold apartment with her coat still on and her hands in her lap. She understood. She understood completely. He was telling her that he knew. He was telling her that he had chosen for his own reasons to let it go, and that the choosing was his entirely, and that she was in his debt for the choosing, and that he expected her to understand exactly what that meant. I understand, she said. Good night, Miss Turner. Good night, Mr. Sullivan. She sat in the quiet for a long time after that. The coffee she eventually made went cold on the table. The soup in her bag went forgotten. Outside, the city made its low and ordinary sounds. She turned her hands over in her lap, palms up. She looked at them. The same hands she had pressed to a stranger's neck to feel for a pulse. The same hands that had held a business card with a gold number. The same hands that had pressed against a bleeding man's side while a voice on the phone told her not to move, not to call, not to speak. She had made peace with a whole life lived quietly, with being small and invisible and unremarkable and safe. Sitting in that kitchen at 3 a.m, she understood something. That peace was over. The question that kept her awake until sunrise, the question she could not put down, no matter how many times she tried, was not, "What have I done?" It was, "What happens next?" And the terrifying, clarifying, absolutely unavoidable truth was this. She had a feeling she was going to find out whether she was ready or not. She went back to work the next morning. What else was she going to do? Call in sick and sit in her apartment, replaying a phone conversation with a man whose voice still lived somewhere at the base of her spine like a splinter she could not reach Emma. Turner had paid her rent every single month for 11 years without missing once. And the way she had done that was by showing up. So she showed up. Murphy's Diner at 6:45 in the morning smelled like burnt coffee and the particular kind of hope that only exists before 7 a.m., when people still believe the day might go their way. Emma tied her apron, filled the coffee station, and did not think about Vincent Sullivan. She did not think about the alley. She did not think about the way Ethan had grabbed her wrist in the dark and said, "I'm sorry you were the one who found me." She thought about Table 4's order and whether the cook had fixed the fryer yet and absolutely nothing else. She lasted until 9:17. That was when the black car appeared outside the diner window. It did not park. It just stopped right at the curb directly across from where Emma was standing with a coffee pot in her hand and a smile she was not feeling on her face. It sat there with its engine idling and its windows the kind of dark that meant you could not see in from the outside. Emma kept pouring coffee into Mr. Delgado's mug, even as every nerve in her body went to full alert. "Hun, you're overflowing my cup," Mr. Delgado said. She stopped pouring. "Sorry. Sorry, Mr. Delgado." When she looked up again, the car was gone. She told herself it meant nothing. She told herself half the cars in this city were black, and half of those had tinted windows, and the fact that it had stopped directly in front did not mean anything, because people stopped their cars in front of diners all the time. That was in fact the entire purpose of a diner. To be stopped in front of. She told herself all of this very thoroughly, and believed none of it. At 11:40 her phone buzzed in her apron pocket. Unknown number. Her stomach dropped straight through the floor. She stepped into the back hallway, the one that smelled like mop water and old grease, and she answered, "Miss Turner." A voice, but not Vincent's voice. Younger, smoother, with a warmth that felt carefully constructed rather than naturally occurring. "My name is Daniel. I work for the Sullivan family. Mr. Sullivan asked me to reach out and confirm a time for this afternoon." "This afternoon," she repeated. "Yes, ma'am. Mr. Ethan Sullivan would like to thank you in person." "I work until 3, Emma said. A brief pause. "Of course. 4 o'clock would be fine. A car will come to the diner." "I don't need a car. I can." "A car will come to the diner," Daniel said again with the same pleasantness, the same warmth, and the absolute total immovability of a wall that had been painted to look like a door. "We'll see you at 3, Miss Turner." He hung up. Emma stood in the back hallway of Murphy's Diner and looked at her phone for a long moment. Then she did the only sensible thing she could think of, which was to go back out and keep working, because the alternative was to stand still and think. And thinking was currently not her friend. At 2:55, she was refilling the napkin holders at the counter when the bell above the door chimed, and a man walked in who did not belong there. Not because of the suit, though the suit was impeccable. Not because of the way he moved, though he moved through the diner, the way people move through spaces they own. It was because of his eyes. Dark, scanning, landing on Emma with the immediate certainty of someone who had been told exactly what she looked like and was now confirming the description against the reality. "Miss Turner," he said, "I'm early. I hope that's all right." He was not Daniel. Daniel had been a voice on a phone. This man was something else entirely. He was Ethan Sullivan, and he looked nothing like the man she had found on the ground. He looked like the kind of man the ground would have moved out of the way for if it had known better. "You're," she started, "significantly more vertical than the last time you saw me." A ghost of something that might have been a smile. "I wanted to come myself." Emma looked at him. She was wearing her work apron. She smelled like the diner. She had a pen tucked behind her ear and a grease stain on her left sleeve she had been meaning to deal with for 3 hours. She was in no condition to receive a man who looked like Ethan Sullivan. "Give me 5 minutes," she said, and walked to the back without waiting for his answer. She told her manager she was leaving early. "Family thing," she said. Her voice was steady. She washed her hands and face in the back sink. She took off her apron. She stood in front of the small cracked mirror above the sink and looked at herself for exactly 10 seconds. "You are fine," she told the woman in the mirror. "He's just a person." The woman in the mirror knew better. They both did. She walked back out. Ethan was sitting at the counter with a coffee in front of him, and he stood when he saw her coming. That was the kind of thing men did not do anymore. And its sudden appearance in her day landed somewhere in her chest and rearranged something she had not expected to have rearranged. "You didn't have to come yourself," she said. "I know." He held her gaze. "I don't do most things I don't have to do. I came because I wanted to." Emma sat down on the stool beside him because standing felt too formal and her feet hurt, and she had run out of patience for performances. "How bad was it, the injury?" "2 cracked ribs, a cut that needed 22 stitches. A pause. "It looked worse than it was. It looked like you were dying." "I know." Something moved through his expression. "I know what it looked like. That's why I came." He turned the coffee mug in his hands, a small restless gesture, the first unpolished thing she had seen from him. "You saved my life, and then lied to my father for me in the same 30 minutes. I thought that deserved at least a conversation." The word sat in the air between them. Lied. He had said it plainly. No softening, no careful language. He was telling her he knew exactly what she had done and why it mattered. "I didn't lie exactly," Emma said. "I just didn't tell him everything." "In my family," Ethan said, "that is the same thing, and we both know it." She looked at him sideways. "You're not going to ask me why I did it. I know why you did it." He set down the mug. "You looked at my face when I told you not to tell him what I said, and you made a decision. You're the kind of person who makes fast decisions and sticks with them." He glanced at her. "I could tell in that alley you weren't panicking. You were assessing." Emma thought about 12 years of midnight shifts and difficult people and situations that required her to think faster than her fear. "I've had practice," she said. "So have I," he said. "Different kind." They sat for a moment in the particular quiet of two people who have been through something together and are only now in the daylight beginning to understand what it means. "The man who hurt you," Emma said carefully. "Was it random?" Ethan's hands stilled on the mug. "Someone did it specifically," she said. She already knew the answer. She had known the answer since the moment she saw his face in that alley when she told him she had called the gold number. But she wanted to hear what he would say. "Yes," he said. "Someone who knew about the card, who knew what calling that number would mean." He looked at her then, and the look was sharp and assessing. Also, she thought, just slightly impressed. You worked that out. You asked me how long ago I'd called. Not whether I'd called or why. You asked how long ago. Like the call itself was the danger. She held his gaze. Someone wanted your father to get to you. Or someone wanted your father pulled away from somewhere else for the night. Either way, whoever did it knew how your family operates. Ethan Sullivan set down the coffee mug very carefully. He looked at her for a long moment, with an expression she could not read completely, and did not try to. You're not what I expected, he said. What did you expect? Someone scared. I am scared, Emma said. I'm excellent at scared. I've been scared since 2:17 this morning. I'm just not going to let it run my face while I'm talking to you. Something happened to his expression then. Something unlocked, became for just a moment unguarded, in a way that made her feel she was seeing the person underneath. The person who existed before the suit, before the family, before whatever complicated machinery had built Ethan Sullivan into who he sat across from her today. My father wants to meet with you again, he said. Emma went very still. Formally, at the house, tonight. I already met your father in an alley at 3 in the morning. That wasn't a meeting, that was a field assessment. He held her gaze. Tonight would be different. He wants to thank you properly. And he wants to... A pause, and she could see him choosing his words with the care of a man who understood that words in his world carried specific weight. Understand you better. The silence in the diner suddenly felt very loud. Understand me, Emma said slowly. You know something now, Ethan said. You know things about last night that no one outside the family knows. And you made a specific choice about what to tell him and what not to tell him. My father needs to know what kind of person makes that kind of choice. Emma looked at the counter, at her hands on it, at the ordinary life arranged all around her, the coffee machines, the laminated menus. Mr. Delgado still at table 3 with his newspaper. The cook arguing with the dishwasher about something behind the kitchen window. And if I say no, she asked. Ethan was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful and honest in a way she suspected he was not always. You can say no. Nobody is going to force you. A pause. But I would be lying if I told you it wouldn't matter. It would raise questions for him. Questions he would answer himself. And the answers he would arrive at on his own without more information. He stopped. Let that sit. Emma understood him perfectly. Vincent Sullivan left to fill in the blanks would fill them in dangerously. So it's not really a choice, she said. Everything is a choice, Ethan said. My family just has a way of narrowing the options. She laughed before she could stop it. It came out surprised and genuine, the kind of laugh that happens when something is so absurd and so perfectly said that the body responds before the brain can approve it. Ethan blinked at her like she was a weather phenomenon he had not predicted. Okay, she said when the laugh had passed. What time? 7. The car will come here. I thought you were the car. I drove myself today. My father doesn't know I came. He said it evenly, like a simple fact, but Emma caught the thing underneath it, the slight recalibration of his posture, the micro-tension that lived in that statement. He doesn't know you came first, Emma said. No. Why? Ethan looked at her steadily. Because I wanted to talk to you before he did. He paused, and she had the distinct impression that what he was about to say was not something he said easily or often. Whatever he asks you tonight, you can tell him the truth about what I said in the alley. I'll handle what comes from it. Emma stared at him. You want me to tell him the truth? I want you to stop carrying a lie for me when you don't have to. She did not say anything for a moment. She was recalibrating. He had come here before his father knew. He was telling her to tell the truth. He was in some complicated way she had not fully mapped yet, trying to protect her from a lie she had chosen to carry on his behalf. Why do you care? She said. You don't know me. No, he said, but I know what it costs. Holding things for my family. I've been doing it my whole life. He stood up, dropped 2 bills on the counter, far too much for a cup of coffee, which she would have argued with him about if he had given her the chance. I didn't want that to start for you because of me. He was at the door before she found her voice. Mr. Sullivan? He turned. What did you say to me in the alley, the part you didn't want your father to know? The whole diner seemed to hold its breath. Or maybe that was just her. Ethan Sullivan held her gaze from across the room for a long moment. Then he said quietly enough that only she could hear it. I said I didn't know who did it, but I said I had a suspicion. He paused. And I said I thought it might be someone inside. Then he pushed through the door, and he was gone. Emma sat at the counter of Murphy's diner with the coffee going cold in front of her, and the weight of what he had just handed her pressing down on her chest like something she would need both hands to carry. Someone inside the operation that had descended on that alley in 4 minutes flat, and moved with the smooth, terrible efficiency of people who had been doing dangerous things for a very long time. Someone in that world had put Ethan Sullivan on the ground in a dark alley and left him there to die. And his father did not know that Ethan knew. And now Emma Turner, waitress, Murphy's Diner, $6 an hour plus tips, knew it too. She sat very still. She untied her apron from around her waist, folded it neatly on the counter, and went home to find something appropriate to wear to a Mafia dinner. The car arrived at 6:55. Black, of course. The driver held the door and said nothing, and Emma got in because she had made her decision. And the particular thing about Emma Turner was that once she made a decision, she did not second-guess it in the doing. She second-guessed every moment leading up to the doing. That was different. She stared out the window as the city changed around her, her neighborhood giving way to wider streets, cleaner buildings, more light. The further they drove, the more the city looked like a different city entirely. And she thought about what Ethan had said. My family just has a way of narrowing the options. She thought about what he had not said, which was, you have been inside this since the moment you dialed. The building was not what she had imagined. She had been picturing something dramatic. A compound, a gate, something that announced itself as dangerous. Instead, it was a townhouse on a quiet street. Beautiful, yes. Elegant in the way that very old money is elegant, which is to say without trying. Clean stone steps. A door that told you nothing about what was on the other side. The door opened before she reached it. A woman stood there, 60s silver-streaked hair pinned back, wearing a cardigan. She looked exactly like someone's grandmother, which Emma was completely certain she was not. Miss Turner, the woman said warmly. Please come in. Mr. Sullivan is expecting you. Emma stepped through the door. The sound of the city disappeared entirely. The woman's name was Rosa. She moved through the Sullivan house the way water moves through a place it has always belonged to, without effort, without announcement. She did not explain anything. She simply walked and expected Emma to follow. Emma followed because the door was behind her, and Rosa was in front, and forward was the only direction that made sense right now. Rosa stopped in front of a set of double doors, knocked twice, turned back to Emma with a smile that was genuinely warm and somehow also completely unreadable. He'll see you now. Can I bring you something, coffee, water? I'm fine, Emma said. Thank you. Rosa nodded and moved away down the hall. Emma stood in front of those double doors and took one breath. Just one. The kind that lives at the bottom of the lungs, where the real oxygen is. Then she pushed them open. Vincent Sullivan was standing at the window with his back to her. He did not turn immediately. He let her walk into the room and stand there for a moment, and she understood that this too was deliberate. Everything this man did in his own space was deliberate. The pause was its own message. I am a man who makes people wait and does not apologize for it. Then he turned. He looked different from the night before, not softer. She doubted Vincent Sullivan owned soft, but more composed, more finished. The version of him she had seen in the alley had been an emergency prototype. This was the final model. Dark jacket, no tie, hair perfectly in place. The only thing that matched the alley was his eyes, which were exactly the same. Reading her, categorizing her, filing her somewhere she could not see. Miss Turner, he said. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the invitation, she said. And she heard her own voice come out steadier than she deserved credit for. Please sit down. She sat. He sat across from her, not behind a desk. She had expected a desk. The power positioning of a man behind a barrier. Instead, he chose a chair that faced hers directly. Nothing between them. She filed that away. My son tells me you refused to let him send a car this afternoon, Vincent said. Emma blinked. Your son told you he came to the diner. My son tells me most things, Vincent said evenly. Eventually. A pause that was not quite a smile. He came to you first before this meeting. He wanted to speak with you privately. Yes. And what did you discuss? She held his gaze. She thought about what Ethan had said. Tell him the truth. I'll handle what comes. She thought about what truth she was actually in possession of, and what truth belonged to Ethan to give. She drew the line quickly, the way she always drew lines, fast and clean. He thanked me, she said. He told me about the injury. He told me about tonight. She paused. And he asked me to tell you the truth about what he said in the alley. The room went very still. Vincent Sullivan did not move. He was extraordinary at not moving. The kind of stillness that was not passive, but active, controlled. A man holding himself in place through pure will, while his mind worked at full speed behind his eyes. Did he? Vincent said. Not a question. He said he had a suspicion about who hurt him. He said he thought it might be someone inside. Emma kept her voice flat and factual. The voice she used when explaining an incorrect bill to a difficult customer. The voice that said, I am telling you what happened and I have no stake in your reaction to it. He didn't want you to not know that. He told me to tell you. For 6 full seconds, Vincent Sullivan said nothing. Emma counted. 6 seconds of silence from a man like this was an eternity, was a continent, was something you could drown in if you let yourself. Then he stood up slowly and walked to the window. His back was to her. She watched the set of his shoulders and understood she was witnessing a man absorbing a blow he had suspected was coming, and finding that the suspecting had not made the landing any softer. He told you this? Vincent said, still at the window. A woman he met 4 hours ago in an alley. I think he told me because I was a woman he met 4 hours ago in an alley, Emma said. I don't have a side. I'm not part of any of this. I'm a waitress from 5th Street. He could tell me the truth, and it didn't cost him anything in terms of loyalty or politics or whatever the calculations are in your world. Vincent turned from the window. He looked at her with an expression she would spend a long time thinking about afterward. Not because she did not understand it. Because she understood it too well. It was the expression of a man who had just been told something by a stranger that the people closest to him had been too careful, too calculated, too afraid to say. You're more perceptive than you present yourself, he said. I present myself exactly as I am, Emma said. You're the one who decided what that meant before I sat down. Another silence. And then Vincent Sullivan did something she had not expected. He almost smiled. It was the barest movement, the ghost of a thing there and gone in less than a second. But it was real. She had seen real things on this man's face now. The father's terror in the alley. And now this. She knew the difference between real and performed. This was real. He sat back down. Tell me about yourself, he said. She had not expected that either. She had expected questions about the alley, about Ethan, about what she knew and what she planned to do with it. She had not expected Vincent Sullivan to lean back in his chair and look at her with something approaching genuine curiosity. There's not much to tell, she said. There never is, according to the people who are most worth knowing. He watched her. You've worked at the diner how long? 12 years, since I was 16. My mother got sick. I needed money. She said it without apology, without the flinching self-consciousness that the story sometimes produced in people who had never had to work at 16 because someone they loved needed medication. No family besides your mother. My father left when I was 8. My mother passed 4 years ago. She held his gaze. It's just me. Vincent absorbed this. And you walked through that alley last night because it's my shortcut home. I've walked it 1,000 times. And you stopped. I stopped, she said. I don't know why exactly. I just stopped. I know why, Vincent said. She waited. Because you're not a person who walks past things, he said. Most people have trained themselves to walk past things. It's a survival mechanism. You never developed it. He paused. That's not a criticism. It's an observation. It's caused me problems before, Emma said honestly. I imagine it has. He studied her. It also saved my son's life. The room shifted. Not physically, the temperature of it. The atmosphere between them. It was the first time he had said it that plainly, that directly, without layering it in formality or implication. My son's life. 3 words that sat between them like something that could not be taken back. How is he? Emma asked. Angry, Vincent said. Which means he's well. Ethan in pain goes quiet. Ethan recovering gets angry. Something moved through his expression gone before she could name it. He'll be fine. I'm glad. Are you? He said it with a weight that made it a real question rather than a pleasantry. Yes, she said simply. I'm glad he's okay. That's not complicated. Vincent looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer me honestly. I've been answering you honestly since I got here. I know. That's why I'm asking. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and for the first time, he looked less like a man in control of an empire, and more like a man who was tired. The kind of tired that lives in the bones. What are you going to do with what you know? Emma did not look away. Nothing. Nothing, he repeated. I'm going to go home tonight and go to work tomorrow morning and make coffee for Mr. Delgado at table 3 and not think about any of this. She paused. I don't want anything from you, Mr. Sullivan. I'm not looking for a reward or a connection or a favor. I found your son, and I called and I stayed. That's all I did. I'm not... She searched for the word, a player in whatever game is happening here. I don't want to be. Vincent Sullivan looked at her for so long that she started to hear the room again, the faint sounds of the house around them, the distant movement of people elsewhere in the building, the clock on the far wall marking seconds with small decisive clicks. That is exactly what someone who wanted to be a player would say, he said. I know, Emma said. I can't prove a negative. You'll have to decide what you believe. I told you last night, he said quietly. I choose to believe you. That choice stands. A pause. But I need you to understand something, Miss Turner. Whatever you intend, whatever your plans are, what you know now puts you in a position that has nothing to do with your intentions. Do you understand what I mean? She understood, with a cold clarity that moved through her like ice water. He was not threatening her. He was telling her the truth. She knew something about an attack on his son. She had been in his home. She had spoken to Ethan privately before this meeting. In the world, Vincent Sullivan operated and those facts existed regardless of Emma Turner's intentions. And other people. People who did not have Vincent's reasons to extend her the benefit of the doubt would draw their own conclusions. Someone tried to hurt your son, she said carefully. And you don't know who yet. And now there's a loose thread. Me. And you're telling me that the person who did it might start pulling that thread before you figure out who they are. Vincent's expression did not change, but something behind it did. You're not what I expected, he said. She realized it was the second time she had heard those exact words in one day. The same words from father and son, and the repetition of it felt like something significant she could not quite name. I know, she said. Everyone keeps saying that. She looked at him directly. What were you expecting me to say when I came tonight? He considered her. Honestly, I thought you were going to ask for money, to stay quiet, and I was going to have to decide whether to offer it. And if I had asked, I would have been disappointed, he said simply. And I would have paid it anyway, because that is the practical thing. But I would have been disappointed. Emma held his gaze. I thought you were going to offer it to me, and I was going to have to decide whether to be offended or practical. Which would you have been? Probably both, she said. At the same time, I'm efficient. The almost smile again, lasting a full second this time. Vincent stood, and the register of the conversation changed. She could feel it, the way you feel a gear shift in a car, even when you cannot hear the engine. Something was about to move differently. I'm not going to offer you money, he said. I'm going to offer you something else. He walked to the door and opened it, and Rosa appeared from nowhere, the way she had disappeared earlier, materializing in the hallway with the quiet efficiency of someone who was always exactly where she was needed. Vincent spoke to her in a low voice. Rosa nodded and was gone again. Vincent turned back to Emma. "I want you to have a number," he said. "A direct number, not the emergency card. My personal line. And I want you to use it if anything unusual happens. If you see something you don't recognize. If someone approaches you. If anything changes in your routine that doesn't feel right." Emma stared at him. "You think I'm in danger?" "I think," Vincent said precisely, "that I don't know yet. And until I do know, I would rather you had a way to reach me in 30 seconds than need one and not have it." The door opened again behind him, and Ethan walked in. Emma understood immediately from the look on his face that he had not known the specifics of what had been said. He was reading the room fast, reading his father's posture and Emma's face and putting together what he could. "You told him," Ethan said to Emma. "You told me to," she said. He looked at his father. Something passed between them, wordless, complex. The compressed communication of two people who had spent decades learning each other's silences. "Who do you think it was?" Vincent asked his son. Direct, no preamble. The question landed in the room like a stone dropped in still water. Ethan did not flinch, but he did not answer immediately either. And the pause was its own answer. He had a name somewhere behind his eyes, a specific name, a face, and he was deciding in real time how much to give. "Not here," Ethan said. His eyes moved briefly to Emma. "She stays," Vincent said. Ethan looked at his father sharply. "She's a civilian. She stopped being a civilian last night at the moment she dialed that number, and she was smart enough to know it before either of us told her." Vincent held his son's gaze. "She stays." Emma sat very still in her chair and watched a father and son conduct an argument entirely without words. She thought about what it must be like to grow up in a world where even your silences were weapons, where everything communicated something, where there was no such thing as a private moment because every moment was tactical. Ethan looked at her. She looked back without apology because she had not asked to stay. That had been Vincent's call, and she was not going to perform contrition for something she had not done. "Caruso," Ethan said finally, still looking at Emma when he said it, like he was testing the sound of the name against the presence of someone outside the family, seeing how it felt. Vincent said nothing for a moment. "Marco Caruso. His people have been moving into the East Corridor for 6 months. We've talked about it. You said to wait." Ethan's voice stayed even, but there was something living underneath it. Something old and tight. "I stopped waiting. I made a move last week without clearing it. And 3 days later someone followed me from the 6th Street office and put a knife in my side." The silence that followed was different from every silence that had come before it in that room. "You made a move," Vincent said slowly. "Without telling me." "Yes." "Without clearing it with me first." "Yes." The word sat between them like a confession and an accusation at the same time. "Why?" Vincent asked. And the word was quiet and completely devastating. Ethan looked at his father. "Because I knew you'd say no." Something crossed Vincent Sullivan's face that Emma would spend a long time thinking about afterward. Not anger. Not betrayal exactly. Something that looked like grief wearing anger's clothes. The grief of a man seeing clearly something he had been not quite letting himself see. "You thought," Vincent said very carefully, "that Caruso's people were already inside. That if you brought it to me through the usual channels, it would get back to them." Ethan said nothing, which was everything. Vincent turned away, walked to the window. His hands were behind his back and very still. Emma watched the tension in his shoulders and understood she was witnessing a man restructuring something fundamental about how he understood his world. "How long?" Vincent said, still at the window. "Have you suspected someone inside?" 4 months, Ethan said. 4 months. Emma watched the number land on Vincent's back like a physical thing. "And you said nothing." "I had no proof. I still have no proof. I have a pattern and a suspicion and a knife in my ribs." Ethan's voice cracked on the last word. Just barely. Just enough. "I didn't want to be wrong, Dad. Not about this." The word landed in the room like the first honest thing that had been said all night. Not Mr. Sullivan. Not the loaded silence of power and legacy and inheritance. Just Dad. Plain and worn and real. Emma felt the back of her throat tighten without permission. Vincent turned from the window. His face had changed again. Not softer. Not harder. Something that existed at the intersection of authority and love, which she was beginning to think was the specific territory Vincent Sullivan had lived in his entire adult life. He looked at his son for a long moment. Then he looked at Emma. "Miss Turner," he said, "I owe you an apology." She blinked. "For what? Or for the position you're now in?" He held her gaze. "You walked into an alley looking for a shortcut home, and instead you walked into something I cannot fully protect you from until I understand its shape." A pause. "I am sorry for that. It was not what you deserved for doing the right thing." Emma looked at Vincent Sullivan. This man with his silver hair and his controlled voice and the father's grief he wore underneath all of it like a second skin. And she thought about what Ethan had said in the diner that afternoon. "I didn't want that to start for you because of me." Father and son. Different words, same meaning. The same impossible, specific kind of care offered to a stranger who had wandered into their world through a crack in the dark. "Don't apologize yet," Emma said. "Wait until we know how it ends." Vincent looked at her. "We," he said quietly. She realized what she had said. She did not take it back. "We," she said, and the clock on the wall kept marking its small, decisive seconds. And somewhere in the house, a door opened and closed. And outside, the city moved through its ordinary nighttime business, completely unaware that in a townhouse on a quiet street, a waitress from 5th Street had just drawn a line she had not known she was going to draw until it was already behind her. She had made peace with a whole quiet life, with being small, with being safe, with being the kind of woman who walked past things and did not ask questions, and went home to soup she had made herself and a couch that knew the shape of her. That woman felt very far away right now. She lifted her chin. She looked at Vincent Sullivan, and she looked at Ethan Sullivan, and she thought some shortcuts don't go where you think they're going. Then she thought maybe that's all right. She left the Sullivan house at 9:47 and was back at Murphy's Diner by 6:15 the next morning, because that was who Emma Turner was. A woman who walked into impossible situations, and then walked back out, and tied her apron and made coffee anyway, because the rent did not care about her complications, and neither did Mr. Delgado's standing order of eggs over easy with rye toast. But something had changed in the geometry of her days. She noticed it first in small ways. The black car that had appeared outside the diner the morning before was replaced by a different car. Silver this time. Different model, different plates, parked half a block down on the opposite side of the street. It was there when she arrived. It was there at her break. It was gone by the time she looked again at 11, and a different car was in a different spot, 2 blocks further down. If she had not been paying the specific kind of attention that Vincent Sullivan had essentially instructed her to pay, she would have missed it entirely. She did not miss it. She did not call the number Vincent had given her because she understood without being told that calling to report something manageable would be read as panic. And panic was the one thing she refused to perform for anyone. She filed it away. She kept working. She watched. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, a man she had never seen before sat down at the counter and ordered coffee and a slice of apple pie and looked at his phone the entire time and left a $20 bill for a $7 order without making eye contact with anyone. Emma refilled his coffee twice and smiled the professional smile and noted the specific way he had positioned himself back to the wall sightline to the door. The particular seated posture of a person who had been trained to never fully relax in a public space. When he left, she found a folded piece of paper under his coffee cup. She picked it up casually, the way she picked up every piece of detritus customers left behind, and slipped it into her apron pocket without opening it. She carried 3 plates to table 6, refilled the salt shakers, and waited until she was in the back hallway before she looked at it. 4 words. Handwritten. No signature. Clean, precise letters that slanted slightly to the right. Don't go home tonight. Emma stood in the back hallway for 10 seconds. Exactly 10. Then she folded the paper back up, put it in her pocket, and walked back out to the counter because there were 4 tables waiting, and she was not going to fall apart in front of the lunch crowd. She called Vincent's number at 2 o'clock from the walk-in freezer, which was the most private place she had access to, and smelled like industrial cold and the particular loneliness of a woman making covert phone calls between the soup stock and the frozen pie crusts. He answered on the first ring. "The note," she said without preamble. "Was it yours?" A beat. Just one. No. Her stomach dropped. "Someone sat at my counter today. Left a note under his cup. It said, 'Don't go home tonight.'" She described the man. Height. Build. The posture. The positioning. The 20 left on a $7 order. She heard Vincent relay something in a low voice to someone else in the room, the words quick and blurred. Emma. It was the first time he had used her first name without the miss, and the absence of it hit her like a small electric shock. "Are you still at the diner?" "Yes, I'm done at 3. "You will not go home at 3. You will wait inside the diner. Someone will come to you." A pause. "Do not leave with anyone who does not use the word November. Do you understand?" "November," she repeated. "Yes, don't be frightened." "I'm not frightened," she said automatically. "Then honestly, I'm frightened, but I'm functional." She heard something on his end that might on a different man have been a short exhale of something close to warmth. "That's all I need you to be. Stay inside." She stayed inside. She cleaned the coffee machines twice. She restocked the napkin holders that did not need restocking. Her manager asked if she was okay, and she said yes, just tired, long week. And her manager said, "Honey, it's Wednesday." And Emma said, "I know, that's what I mean." At 3:22, the bell above the door chimed and Ethan walked in. She had not expected Ethan. She had expected one of the silent large men from the alley. She had mentally prepared for a stranger with a code word and a black car. She had not prepared for Ethan Sullivan in a gray jacket, looking like he had slept approximately 4 hours and was running on something more dangerous than coffee. "November," he said before she could speak. "That's the word," she confirmed. "Let's go. Your father said someone would come. He didn't say it would be you." "I volunteered." He held the door. "Emma, we need to move." She untied her apron for the second time in 2 days, told her manager another family thing, received a look that communicated her manager's deep skepticism about the sudden proliferation of Emma's family emergencies, and walked out. The car was running at the curb. Older. Less conspicuous. The kind of car that disappeared in traffic rather than standing apart from it. Ethan got in the driver's seat, which surprised her again, and she got in the passenger side, and they were moving before she had fully closed the door. "Who left the note?" she asked. "We don't know yet." His eyes were on the mirrors more than the road, a pattern of attention she was starting to recognize as standard operating procedure in his world. "But the man you described, the positioning, the order, the tip, that's not random. That's someone who was told to send you a message and knew how to do it without being identified." "So someone knows I was at your house last night?" "Yes. And they want me scared. They want you gone," Ethan said. "There's a difference. Scared people make noise. Gone people stop being a variable." He glanced at her. "Someone is trying to clean up loose threads before my father finds the center of the knot. You're a thread." "You said something almost exactly like that in the diner yesterday. Because it was true yesterday, and it's more true today." He changed lanes smooth and fast. "My father made some calls last night after you left. Quiet calls. He's trying to identify who inside has been feeding information to Caruso. And whoever that person is, they know something shifted. They don't know exactly what, but they know something moved. And faster means sloppier, and sloppier means that note." Emma looked at her hands in her lap. She thought about her apartment, the couch, the microwave clock, the window that looked out on the ordinary street. She thought about the peace she had made with that life, and the night it had ended, and the strange compressed speed of the last 36 hours. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Somewhere safe while my father handles the next 12 hours. A pause. "I'm sorry. I know you didn't sign up for this. You keep apologizing. I keep having things to apologize for." Stop, she said. I made my own choices. Every one of them. Don't take those away from me by making them your fault. He glanced at her again, and this time the glance lasted longer than the mirrors required. Long enough that she noticed. And he noticed her noticing. And he put his eyes back on the road with the air of a man who had been caught doing something he was not sure he was allowed to do. They drove for 20 minutes. The city thinned and then thickened again in a different way. Ethan parked and led her up the steps of a brownstone that was clearly maintained by people who cared about it, and unlocked the door with a key from his jacket pocket and held it open for her. "Whose place is this?" she asked. "Mine," he said. "Not the family house. Mine." She stepped inside. The difference from the Sullivan family townhouse was immediate and total, not in quality. The place was well kept and comfortable, but in temperature and personality. The family house had been curated, had been a statement. This was a place where someone actually lived. There were books stacked horizontally on top of other books. A coffee mug on the side table that had not been washed yet. A jacket thrown over the back of a chair at an angle that no housekeeper would have permitted. She fell unexpectedly and inconveniently immediately at ease. "Sit wherever you want," Ethan said, moving to the kitchen. "Are you hungry? I should warn you my cooking is technically legal, but morally questionable." "I'm fine," she said. Then her stomach argued with her loudly in the specific way that stomachs argue when you have been too anxious all day to eat properly. "Actually, whatever you have, whatever you—" She sat down on the couch and let herself just for a moment stop performing composure. She dropped her head back, closed her eyes, took 3 breaths that started in the chest and ended eventually in the place below the fear where the real steadiness lived. "You okay?" Ethan called from the kitchen. "Fine. Talk to me. Distract me." She opened her eyes at the ceiling. "Tell me something that has nothing to do with any of this." A pause. The sound of something being stirred. "I wanted to be an architect." She lifted her head. "Really?" "Until I was 19, I was good at it. The spatial reasoning, the structural logic. I liked the idea of building something you could see from the street 20 years later and know you had made it." A beat. "Then my grandfather got sick and my father needed me, and architecture became not an option." "Do you resent it?" "Some days." The honesty of it was so immediate, she knew it was true. "Some days I walk past a building I like and I think about it, and then I think about something else." He appeared in the doorway of the kitchen. "What about you? What did you want to be?" She looked at him. No one had asked her that in a very long time. The question had fallen out of her life somewhere around 16, along with the luxury of wanting things that were not immediately practical. "A teacher," she said. "Elementary school. I used to practice on the neighborhood kids when I was 12. Set up a little classroom in my living room and teach them things I'd learned in school." She paused. "My mother used to watch from the doorway and laugh, not at me, just at how seriously I took it." Something on Ethan's face went quietly tender. "Why didn't you?" "Same reason you didn't," she said simply. "Life got in the way of living." He looked at her for a moment. Something in the look she had not seen from him yet. Not the assessment, not the calculation. Something newer than all of those. Something that lived on the other side of all the armor they both wore. He went back to the kitchen without saying anything. She did not push it. He came back 10 minutes later with 2 bowls of pasta that were, despite his warning, genuinely good. Simple and hot. The kind of food that tasted like someone had actually thought about whether you were hungry. She ate without embarrassment, because there was no one here to perform for, and she had run out of energy for it anyway. They ate in a silence that was against all rational reason comfortable. "Caruso," Emma said, finally setting her bowl down. "Tell me who he is." Ethan set his bowl down too. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the same posture his father had used in the family house. She noticed it without remarking on it. This genetic grammar of how Sullivan men held themselves when they were about to say something real. "Marco Caruso runs the East Side, has for about 8 years. He and my father had an arrangement, territorial, financial, the usual architecture of coexistence. It held." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Then my father started pulling back, stepped back from 3 operations last year, handed them to me to manage. Caruso read that as weakness, started moving. Small incursions at first. Things you could argue were accidents. You stopped arguing. I shut down one of his distribution channels. Clean, quiet, no violence, just closed it. Sent a message without sending a message. He looked at his hands. I should have told my father first. I know that. I told myself I was protecting him from having to make a decision he would find difficult. He stopped. You wanted to prove something, Emma said. He looked up at her. You wanted to prove you could handle it without him. That you didn't need his permission, or his protection, or his guidance. The silence lasted long enough that she wondered if she had gone too far. This habit of saying the true thing before checking whether anyone wanted it. Yeah, Ethan said quietly. Yeah, that's exactly it. He exhaled. And someone inside the family told Caruso what I did, and Caruso responded, and here we are. Who knows about the inside leak? Other than you and your father and me. My father's two most senior men, Luca and Dom. He told them last night. And you trust them. My father trusts them. That's not what I asked. Ethan held her gaze. I trust Luca, he said. Dom, I'm less certain of. But I have no basis for that except instinct. And my father doesn't operate on instinct alone. He needs proof. And finding proof when the person you're looking for knows you're looking is almost impossible. Emma finished. Yes. She sat with this for a moment. Somewhere outside a car passed and she tracked it automatically. This new instinct she appeared to be developing. She did not relax until the sound moved away and kept moving. The note, she said. Don't go home tonight. If it wasn't yours, wasn't your family's, then it came from Caruso's side. Which means someone on Caruso's side knows about me. Which means the person inside your family who has been feeding Caruso information told him about me. She paused. Which means the inside person knows I was at the house last night. Knows I had a conversation with your father that they weren't part of. And they're afraid of what I might have said. Ethan looked at her steadily. Walk me through it. The inside person knows something was discussed last night that shifted something. They don't know what. They weren't there. But they know a civilian woman who found you in an alley, was brought into your father's house, and had a private conversation and left. And then your father made a series of quiet calls. She held his gaze. They're not trying to scare me away because I'm dangerous. They're trying to scare me away because they don't know what I know. And not knowing is worse. The silence was charged. Electric. You figured that out, Ethan said slowly. In about 45 seconds. I've been thinking about it all day. I had a lot of time between coffee refills. Emma. He said her name carefully like he was testing the weight of it. What you just described. That's leverage. If the inside person is trying to neutralize you because they don't know what you know, then what they think you know is the only thing making you useful instead of just dangerous. I understand. My father needs to hear this. Ethan pulled out his phone. He dialed. It rang twice. Vincent answered. Ethan said, I'm putting you on speaker, and set the phone on the coffee table between them, like a bridge between two conversations that had been running in parallel, and were only now joining into one. She has something, Ethan said to his father. Emma leaned forward and laid it out for Vincent, the same way she had laid it out for Ethan. Clean. Sequential. No editorializing. The note was a symptom, not a threat. The inside person's motivation. The leverage that lived in the ambiguity of what Emma knew versus what they feared she knew. When she finished, there was a silence on the line. You're suggesting, Vincent said, that we use your uncertainty as bait. I'm suggesting the uncertainty already exists and someone is already reacting to it. The question is whether you react to their reaction or use it. Another silence. Longer. Dom, Ethan said quietly to his father. Don't, Vincent said. Dad. Emma just described someone who knew she was at the house, knew about the calls you made afterward, and moved fast enough to put a man in her diner by 1 o'clock. That's someone with direct access to your schedule. Luca doesn't know your schedule hour by hour. A pause that carried everything inside it. Dom does. The silence on the phone was a different kind of silence now. Emma had sat through several varieties of Vincent Sullivan's silences in the last 24 hours, and she was beginning to understand their taxonomy. This one was the worst kind. Not the silence of a man thinking. The silence of a man feeling something he had no protocol for feeling. 22 years, Vincent said. His voice was exactly controlled and completely devastated underneath the control. Dom has been with this family 22 years. Emma looked away from the phone, because this too was too private a thing to witness directly. I know, Ethan said. I'm going to get you proof. I have a way. But I need you to let me do this one cleanly. No moves without clearing it first. Ethan, I learned that lesson, but let me do this. A long pause. Then Vincent said something that Emma understood without being told was not something he said easily or often to his son. Tell me the plan first. Ethan looked at Emma, and she looked back at him, and she saw it happening in real time. Something shifting in the architecture of who Ethan Sullivan was and who he was allowing himself to be. Some wall coming down not with drama, but with the quiet inevitability of a wall that had simply been standing too long. Emma's the plan, he said. She went very still. She's the thread they're afraid of. Ethan continued, still holding her gaze. We let them think they've scared her off. She goes quiet. No visible contact with the family. Meanwhile, she's the one person they will never expect to be running anything because she's a waitress from 5th Street and they've already decided what that means. He paused. And Dom is the one person who will underestimate her the most. Because Dom underestimates everyone who didn't grow up in this world. Ethan. Vincent's voice was sharp. What exactly are you proposing? A conversation. A casual, accidental conversation between Dom and Emma at a place he has no reason to suspect is anything other than coincidence. Something that lets him fill in the blanks himself about what she told you. Something that either confirms or clears him depending on how he reacts. He paused. She's good at conversations, Dad. You spent an hour with her last night. You know exactly what I mean. The silence on the line stretched to 15 seconds. 20. Emma counted because counting was something to do with the part of her brain that wasn't sitting very still in Ethan Sullivan's apartment, understanding that she was being proposed as the center of something she had not agreed to yet. Miss Turner, Vincent said. Are you there? I'm here. No one is going to compel you to do anything. I want that said clearly in front of my son so there is no ambiguity about it. A pause. But I want to ask you directly. What do you want to do? Emma thought about the note under the coffee cup. She thought about the silver car outside the diner. She thought about a man who had been in Vincent Sullivan's inner circle for 22 years and had spent 4 months feeding information to the person who had put a knife in Ethan's side and left him to die in a cold alley on a street she had walked 1,000 times. She thought about what it costs, letting something like that go unaccounted for. She thought about her mother, who had been the kind of woman who walked past things and had spent her whole life quietly regretful about it. Tell me about Dom, she said. She heard Vincent exhale, just barely, just 1 degree of relief released into the controlled air of whatever room he was in. 61 years old. Careful man, vain about his read on people. Considers himself the best judge of character in the family. Ethan made a sound that communicated precisely how wrong Dom was about that. He likes restaurants, meets contacts at restaurants, always the same 3 rotates them. He'll be at Carmine's on Thursday. Thursday, Emma repeated. That gives me 2 days. You don't have to, Ethan started. I know I don't have to, she said. She looked at him directly. Stop treating me like I'm fragile. I am not fragile. I am a woman who has been managing difficult people in confined spaces for 12 years, and I am telling you that I can sit across from a man at a restaurant and have a conversation that tells you what you need to know. She paused. What I need from you is everything you know about him, how he talks, what he's proud of, what he's afraid of, the vanities and the soft spots. She looked at the phone. Both of you. A silence. Then Ethan said very quietly, so quietly, it was almost just air. Okay. And Vincent said with something in his voice that had moved past assessment, past recalibration, into something older and more absolute. Okay. Emma sat back. 2 days felt like 2 weeks, and also like 2 minutes, which was the specific cruelty of time when you were preparing for something you could not fully prepare for. Thursday was 2 days away. She had 2 days to become the kind of woman that a man like Dom would look at and see exactly what he expected to see, and absolutely nothing else. She had spent 12 years being underestimated. She was about to find out what it was worth. Emma spent Wednesday at the diner the way she always spent Wednesdays at the diner. Efficiently, quietly, visibly. She poured coffee and cleared plates and smiled the professional smile and said, "Have a good day" to people who were already forgetting her face before they reached the door. She let herself be exactly what Dom and Caruso's people expected her to be. A woman who had received a warning and taken it. A woman who had gone quiet. But in the hours between closing the diner and sleeping, she sat at her kitchen table with Ethan's voice in her ear through the phone. And she learned Domenico Ferraro the way she had once learned every table in Murphy's by feel, by pattern, by the specific grammar of what a person wanted and how they wanted to receive it. Dom was 61 and had been with the Sullivan family since Vincent's father had run the operation, which made him furniture in the truest sense. So present for so long that people stopped seeing him as separate from the room. He was careful, the way institutional people are careful. Not out of fear, but out of habit. Out of the deep groove worn by decades of operating close to danger without ever quite touching it. He was proud of his read on people. He considered himself the family's best judge of character, which Ethan said with a flatness that communicated how precisely wrong Dom was about that. He was vain about his appearance. He liked being recognized in restaurants. He liked when women of a certain age noticed him. Women who looked like they had lived enough to know what they were looking at. Emma Turner was 32 years old and had been underestimated since she was 16. She knew exactly how to be the kind of woman a man like Dom would look at and decide in the first 30 seconds that he understood completely. "Don't try to extract information," Ethan told her. Wednesday night, his voice quiet and serious through the phone. "Don't ask questions that feel like questions. Just be there. Be someone he wants to talk to. Let him fill the space. Men like Dom fill every space they're in because silence feels like a power vacuum to them, and they cannot tolerate a vacuum." "And when he asks about the Sullivans," Emma said, "because he will." "He will," Ethan agreed. "Look slightly uncomfortable, like you went to that house and it shook you more than you're admitting, like you're still processing." "That won't be hard," she said. "Emma." His voice shifted into the register she had learned to recognize as real rather than calculated. "If anything feels wrong, anything at all, you leave. You don't explain, you don't excuse yourself, you just stand up and walk out. Luca will be in the restaurant. I know, you've told me 3 times. I'm telling you a 4th time." "Ethan." "What?" "I'll be fine." A pause. Then very quietly, "You don't have to do this." "I know," she said. For the 4th time. She thought it and did not say it. Good night. She slept 4 hours. When she woke at 5, it was still dark, and she lay in the quiet of her apartment and did the thing she had always done when she was afraid, which was to have a very direct conversation with the fear. Lay it out plainly. Look at its actual dimensions rather than the shadow it threw on the wall. The worst that could happen, Dom recognized the setup. Dom was better at reading people than Ethan gave him credit for, and he looked across that restaurant table and saw through her completely. In that case, she stood up and walked out. Luca was there. Vincent handled what came next. The best that could happen. Dom talked. Dom filled the space. Dom, in the particular vanity of a man who had spent 22 years believing he was the smartest person adjacent to power, said something that gave Vincent what he needed. Everything in between was just conversation. And Emma Turner had been having difficult conversations since she was 12 years old, and the world had required her to be more than she was ready to be. She could have one more. She got up. She made coffee. She got dressed. Thursday. Carmine's was the kind of restaurant that knew exactly what it was and had stopped apologizing for it. Emma arrived at 12:45 alone and asked for a table by the window. The hostess seated her without a second glance, because Emma had perfected over 48 hours of practice the specific bearing of a woman who belonged wherever she decided to be. She ordered sparkling water. She did not look around the room. She did not look for Luca because she trusted that Luca was there, and looking for him would be exactly the kind of tell that a man like Dom would notice from across a room. At 1:05, Dom arrived. She recognized him from the photograph Ethan had shown her. Heavy-set, silver-haired, wearing a jacket that was expensive without being showy. Moving through the restaurant with the comfort of a man arriving home. He spoke to the maitre d' by name. He shook a hand at one table. He was, Emma thought, performing his ease the same way she was performing hers. And the performance was so polished that she suspected even he had forgotten it was one. He noticed her before he sat down. She felt his gaze cross her face and pause there just a half-second. The specific half-second of a man who has spotted something that interests him and is deciding whether to acknowledge it. She was looking out the window when it happened, which was intentional, and she turned back to the room at the exact right moment to find him looking and allowed herself to look momentarily naturally caught. She gave him a small, polite, slightly distracted smile. The smile of a woman whose mind was elsewhere. He sat at his table. 2 men with him. She clocked them in her peripheral vision and did not stare. She ate the first course and was somewhere in the middle of a glass of water when Dom appeared beside her table. "Forgive me," he said, and his voice was warm and practiced and completely confident. "You look like you're waiting for someone who isn't coming. I've been that person at that table." A self-deprecating smile. "Domenico Ferraro. I don't mean to intrude." "Emma," she said. No last name. Just Emma, simply the way you say a name when you have nothing to hide. And no, not waiting, just thinking. "May I?" He gestured to the chair across from her. She hesitated exactly long enough, and with exactly the right kind of hesitation. The hesitation of a woman who was mildly uncertain but not unfriendly. "Of course." He sat. He ordered something from a passing server without looking at the menu. The action of a man who had been coming here long enough that the menu was memory. He asked about her gently conversationally, the practiced interest of someone who had learned that people opened up when they felt seen, rather than interrogated. She told him a version of the truth which was always easier to maintain than a complete fabrication. She was a waitress. She had had an unusual week. She was trying to clear her head. "Unusual how?" he asked, and his eyes were warm and completely attentive. And she thought, there he is. The thing underneath the warmth. The listening that was actually gathering. "I had an experience," she said carefully, and looked down at her water glass and let her face do the work. The slight tightening around the eyes. The micro-tension in her jaw that said, "I am not sure how much of this to say." She had practiced this in her bathroom mirror. "I met some people I wasn't expecting to meet, and I'm not sure what to make of it." "What kind of people?" "Powerful people." She glanced up. The kind of powerful where you don't really understand what you've walked into until you're already inside it. Dom held her gaze, and she watched very carefully the thing that moved in his eyes. Not surprise. Something more like interest sharpening. The way a dog's ears move toward a sound it recognizes. "That sounds uncomfortable," he said. It was clarifying, she said. She let the words sit there. Let him wonder what it meant. "I thought I understood how things worked. It turns out I understood a lot less than I thought." She paused. "And now I know more than I intended to." The silence lasted 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, Dom Ferraro did something that she would report to Ethan later with precision. He did not ask what she knew. A genuinely curious man, an uninvolved man would have asked. Instead, he smiled and redirected and said, "Powerful people can be a lot of things. Mostly they're just people who got very good at one specific thing very early." He had not asked what she knew. He had not asked who these people were. He had moved the conversation sideways with the ease of a man who had been moving conversations sideways for 22 years. Emma looked at him and understood with a cold and perfect clarity that Ethan was right. She let the conversation run another 20 minutes. She was generous with her uncertainty, with her visible unease, with the carefully managed impression of a woman who knew something was sitting inside her that she had not fully processed yet. She let Dom believe he was the one steering. She let him fill every space she created, which he did fluently, gracefully. The way he filled every space, she left first. She shook his hand. She smiled and said it was a pleasure, and meant none of it and let none of that show. She walked out of Carmine's on steady legs and got half a block before Luca materialized beside her, silent and solid, falling into step, as if he had always been there. "Car's around the corner," he said. "I know," she said. He looked at her sideways. "I heard." She stopped walking. "You had audio." Mr. Sullivan wanted to be certain. She absorbed this, thought about being annoyed, and decided it was not worth the energy. "Then he already knows." "He's waiting," Luca said. "Both of them." Vincent was standing when she walked in. Ethan was beside him. The specific tension in the room told her they had been listening in real time, and the conversation she had just had in Carmine's was still alive in this room, still reverberating. She sat down. Neither of them sat. "He didn't ask," she said. "No," Vincent said. "He didn't. He moved the conversation sideways twice. Once when I said I knew more than I intended to. Once when I mentioned powerful people. Both times he went sideways instead of forward." She held his gaze. "An innocent man asks. A man with something to protect redirects." "It's not proof," Vincent said. His voice was stripped of almost everything. Just the words. Just the fact. "No," Emma agreed. "But it's what Ethan said it would be. A confirmation or a clearing, and he didn't clear himself." The silence in the room was the heaviest she had sat in yet. She watched Vincent Sullivan process 22 years of trust against 40 minutes of a conversation in a restaurant that a waitress from 5th Street had conducted, and she did not rush him. Because some things required their full weight to be felt before they could be moved. Ethan looked at her across the room. She looked back. Something passed between them that was not a conversation and not quite an understanding, more like a recognition. The specific recognition of two people who had arrived at the same place from completely opposite directions and were only now standing in it together. "I need to make a call," Vincent said quietly. "Excuse me." He left the room. The door did not close all the way behind him, and Emma could hear him in the hallway, low and controlled, saying a name she did not recognize. Twice. Before the voice became too quiet to follow. Ethan moved and sat in the chair his father had vacated. He was close enough now that she could see the specific tiredness in his face. The 4 days of compressed living that had taken up residence around his eyes. "You were right about him underestimating me," Emma said. "I know." He paused. "It made me angry, even though it was the point, even though I was counting on it." She looked at her hands. He looked right at me and saw nothing worth worrying about. 20 seconds. That's all it took him. "And you used it." "Yes," she said. "But I want you to know it cost something." She looked up at him. "I spent 12 years being that invisible. I had just started thinking maybe it didn't have to be permanent." Ethan held her gaze with an expression so unguarded it almost hurt to look at directly. "It doesn't," he said, "have to be permanent." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she nodded once and looked away, because some things were too new and too fragile for direct examination. Vincent came back. He stood in the doorway for just a moment. Long enough for Emma to see again the father underneath the patriarch, the man underneath the power. Then he straightened and walked to his chair and sat. "It's being handled," he said. Emma did not ask how. She understood that there were parts of this world she had consented to enter and parts she had not, and the handling of Dom Ferraro was solidly in the second category. She intended to keep it there. "And Caruso?" Ethan asked. "Caruso is a separate conversation for a separate day." Vincent looked at his son. "One that we will have together, with full information. No unilateral moves." He paused, and the pause carried 22 years of a complicated relationship inside it. "Agreed," Ethan said. Something moved between them. Some renegotiation. Some mutual recognition that the dynamic that had existed between them for 34 years had shifted quietly but completely sometime in the last 4 days. Not broken. Rebuilt. Stronger at the cracks the way well-repaired things always are. Vincent looked at Emma. "Miss Turner," he said. Then he stopped. He looked at her for a long moment with the expression of a man who had spent a lifetime knowing exactly what to say and had arrived unexpectedly at a situation that had outrun his vocabulary for it. "I don't have adequate language," he said finally, "for what you did this week. Not just today. All of it. Every choice from the alley forward." Emma opened her mouth. "Don't say it was nothing," he said quietly. "Please let me say this." She closed her mouth. "You walked into a situation that had nothing to do with you, and you made every right decision under pressure, without training, without any reason to, except that you are apparently constitutionally incapable of walking past things that need attending to." He paused. "You protected my son with a lie in an alley. You told me the truth in my own house. You sat across from a dangerous man today and played a game that people in my world spend years learning, and you did it with 48 hours of preparation and the specific grace of someone who has been underestimated so long they know exactly what to do with it." His voice was very controlled and very quiet and absolutely sincere. "I am in your debt. That is not a thing I say lightly. It is simply true." Emma sat with this for a moment. She thought about her mother watching from a doorway while she taught the neighborhood kids in the living room. She thought about being 16 years old with a sick parent and a diner apron, and 12 years of being in motion, always in motion, because stopping meant feeling how small the world she had been given was. "I want one thing," she said. Vincent held her gaze. "Name it. When this is over, all of it. Caruso Dom, whatever comes next. I want to know it's actually over. I want you to tell me yourself directly when it's done." She paused. "I don't want to spend the rest of my life wondering if the silver car is still out there." "You have my word," Vincent said. No hesitation. No calculation. Just the word of a man who understood that some currencies were worth more than money. She nodded. She stood. She picked up her bag. She looked at Ethan, who was looking at her with the expression she had first seen in his apartment over pasta. The one that lived on the other side of all his armor. The one she suspected very few people had ever seen, and none of them recently. "Thursday next week," he said. She tilted her head. "What?" "I thought I'd come to the diner for coffee." He held her gaze, and the careful, almost smile was back. The one that was real. "If that's all right." Emma Turner looked at Ethan Sullivan. This man who had been bleeding in an alley 4 days ago. This man whose world was 1,000 miles from her own in every way that could be measured, and probably several that could not. And she thought about architects who became something else, and teachers who became waitresses, and shortcuts that did not go where you thought they were going. "Thursday," she said. "I'll save you a seat." She walked down the hallway. Rosa was already at the door. The car was already at the curb. The city was already doing what cities do. Indifferent and enormous and full of a million lives running in parallel. None of them touching all of them. One wrong turn away from collision. She got in the car. She looked out the window as her neighborhood came back into view. Her street. Her building. The cracked front step she had been meaning to report for 3 months. The bodega on the corner where Tony knew her order. All of it exactly as she had left it. All of it exactly the same. She was not exactly the same. She did not know yet what she was exactly. That was fine. She had learned this week that not knowing exactly was not the same as being lost. Sometimes not knowing exactly meant you were standing at the beginning of something, and the not knowing was just the feeling of the new thing being larger than your current vocabulary for it. She got out of the car. She climbed her steps. She unlocked her door. She went inside and stood in her apartment for a moment in the quiet of a Thursday evening. She hung up her jacket. She put on the coffee. She sat down at her kitchen table and she turned her hands over, palms up, and looked at them. The same hands that had pressed to a stranger's neck to feel for a pulse. The same hands that had held a business card printed in gold. The same hands that had pressed against a bleeding man's side while a voice on the phone told her not to move, not to call, not to speak. She had stopped. She had knelt in the dark. She had dialed. She had stayed. She had looked Vincent Sullivan in the eye and told the truth and held the line and walked into the mouth of something enormous and walked back out with her name intact and her spine straight and the particular undefeated certainty of a woman who had discovered at 32 that the thing she had spent her whole life being trained for was not pouring coffee. It was this. The coffee finished. She poured a cup. She sat in her kitchen in the ordinary quiet of her life, which was no longer ordinary, and would never be ordinary again. And she did not grieve that. And she did not fear it. Emma Turner had found a dying man in an alley and saved him. And in doing so, without planning it, without asking for it, she had also saved herself. That was not nothing. That was not luck. That was not an accident. That was exactly who Emma Turner had always been. She had simply finally run out of reasons to pretend otherwise, and she was never going back.